Hey everybody, my name is Dr. Scott Giacomucci. I'm the director and founder of the Phoenix Center for Experiential Trauma Therapy in Media, Pennsylvania. I'm board certified in clinical social work and psychodrama, and I'm an experiential therapy trainer and educator. I'm really excited that you found this video, and I hope that you find it helpful in your work. This is part of an ongoing video series highlighting my recently published book, Social Work, Sociometry, and Psychodrama, Experiential Approaches for Group Therapists, Community Leaders, and Social Workers. In this video series, we'll be going through the book chapter by chapter to articulate some of the content of the book, to warm you up to the book perhaps, or to help you further understand, process, and digest the content and the processes that are outlined in this book. If you haven't already gotten a copy of the book, you can download it for free online at Springer Nature's website, the publisher, or on Amazon through their ebook platform. If you do find the book helpful, I would be incredibly grateful if you considered leaving an Amazon review, an honest Amazon review about the book, so that we can help reach future audiences. In this video, we'll be focusing on Chapter 5 of the book. Chapter 5 is on sociometry and social work theory. Moreno had this other idea called the organic unity of mankind. And so this describes the phenomenon of the entire human group being its own entity. That we talk about smaller groups as taking on a group as a whole experience, that the group becomes its own entity, that it's more than just the sum of all of its parts. And he applied this same concept, the same idea, to all of humanity. He believed that there was this organic unity within humanity that bound us together as parts of the same species and of the same group, parts of all of humanity or society, that our humanness bound us together. Sometimes he referred to it as a sort of primordial nature. So, considering that mankind is a unity, Moreno writes that there's these tendencies between parts of society to draw it together at times into unity, and to pull it apart into disunity and fragmentation at other times. He says that these integrative and disintegrative forces are detectable within the system of attractions and repulsions within social networks, groups, social atoms, and relationships. He writes, and I quote him, that the human group has a science configuration of its own. And so, when we're thinking about sociometry and societry, I just want to also take a moment and identify that all of this exists within even a larger framework. That Moreno, he liked to create words and ideas, and he was incredibly prolific in generating and creating new concepts and labeling phenomenons that others hadn't labeled before. If you can imagine a larger umbrella of what Moreno called socionomy, and that within this umbrella, this umbrella of socionomy, that there's three parts. Socionomy being about the study of society, of social forces. That the branch of science dealing with all things social, basically. That there were three branches from that overarching umbrella of socionomy. First one being sociodynamics, and that this was about social measurement, exploring the sociodynamics rather than just the psychodynamics, exploring sociodynamics within groups, within social atoms, within sociograms, and social networks. The second branch being about healing society, and this is called societry. So sociometry is about all the different interventions that we employ, the different interventions Moreno created: psychodrama, sociometry, group psychotherapy, sociodrama, to promote healing within society. Sociometry. So we have, underneath socionomy, we have sociodynamics, we have sociometry, and then we have sociometry, which is the science of social laws. So it can be helpful to conceptualize the bigger picture here as well. Now, at the end of Moreno's famous book, Who Shall Survive, he actually proposes over 100 hypotheses for future sociometric research. And these are later restructured in his 1943 publication, Sociometry and the Cultural Order. And in that later publication, he organizes them into 8 hypotheses about the organic unity of mankind. So I'm going to go through those 8 hypotheses briefly. This is really getting into some of the complexities of Moreno's sociometric system that often get overlooked. The first hypothesis is what Moreno calls sociogenetic law. And this describes how human society becomes more and more complex and more differentiated over time. That human society starts off as being less complex. It's more simple. It's a smaller group. There's less differentiation and complexity. It's more undifferentiated. And that over time, throughout the history of humankind and throughout the history of society, as society grows, it grows to become more complex and differentiated. That there's different groupings and social networks and social atoms within society that get more complex and differentiate from each other. In some ways, this is a parallel process for how groups, communities, organizations, and families evolve over time. And even how our individual biology has evolved over time, from being more simple organisms, and throughout the timeline of evolution, how we've become more complex, and how the different systems within our body and within our brain have become more differentiated and have a lot more complexity than our ancestors going way back. So this describes sociogenetic law. The second hypothesis is what Moreno describes as the reality testing of social configurations. And so this describes that in reality, where groups are formed intentionally, they will always be more complex than groups that are formed by chance, or than by groups that are generated randomly by computers, or even intentionally by computer algorithms. That when we compare randomly generated groups, or groups that a computer generates, and we compare those with groups that are actually created in reality, that the real groups are always going to be more complex. There's going to be much more layers of complexity. And that this would come back to the sociodynamic effect to tell the organic unity of mankind and the system of attractions and repulsions within relationships. The third hypothesis is what Moreno calls the reality testing of cultural configurations. So similar to the second hypothesis, but this is about cultural configurations. And this describes how the role, this ties into role theory, role is the mechanism by which culture is exchanged. And that real role relationships and cultural atoms will always be more complex than role relationships or cultural atoms that are generated by chance or that are generated by a computer. So very similar to the second hypothesis, except this is focused on role relationships and culture. The fourth hypothesis is about the sociodynamic effect, which I described previously. This underlying social dynamic at play in all social groupings, which results in the distribution of choices, of social wealth, preferences being unequally distributed. The fifth hypothesis is about the social atom being the smallest functioning unit of the human group. That when we look at things in their totality, all of society, the entire human group, the organic unity of mankind, humans as a species, we can look at it on the macro level, and as we start to hone in our focus into smaller and smaller groups, smaller and smaller units, social units, from society to larger social networks and communities, into social atoms and sociograms, into relationships and social atoms, that the social atom, the depiction of relationships, is the smallest unit within the human group. The sixth hypothesis is titled Psychological Currents and Networks. And so this would be what I had referenced previously about social networks, psychosocial networks. These are the invisible sociometric webs within large groups, the invisible currents by which information flows between people. So Moreno had hypothesized nearly 100 years ago that these individual social networks exist within larger groups. The seventh hypothesis is called the law of social gravity. And this is a hypothesis that proposes that relationships between human beings are largely impacted by physical proximity and distance between human beings. That our physical proximity, the people that we are physically closest to and geographically closest to, are often also the folks who we are psychologically and emotionally and socially closest to. So without technology, without YouTube, without Zoom, without WhatsApp, without phones and computers, the folks who we're most intimately connected to are almost always the people who we're physically closest to in proximity. So this is called the law of social gravity. This certainly still applies in today's world, the modern world, with all the technology that we have. And there's ways that technology allows us to transcend some of the limits of this law of social gravity. Kind of similar to how there's ways that technology allows us to transcend the laws of gravity in general, how we can fly in airplanes and how we can travel into space. So technology really impacts this one. The eighth hypothesis is that the psychosocial organization and function, the psychosocial organization of groups, impacts its function. So this reminds me of osteopathic medicine and its philosophy, that Moreno is saying the structure of a group or of society or of a community or of a social atom or sociogram, the structure of it has a determining influence on the functioning of it and its leadership. So the ways that groups are structured impact how they function. And so this really highlights the importance of sociometry yet again, that we need to be able to assess, identify, and intervene on, change the underlying structures within groups so that we can help them function in more optimal ways. So these are the 8 hypotheses that Moreno outlines related to the organic unity of mankind. So I really hope that you found this video helpful. If you wanted to read more about these connections, you can check out chapter 5 in the book. Again, you can download the entire book for free online, and we'll put a link to the book in the description here. If you found the book helpful, it would really go a long ways to consider writing an Amazon review, an honest review about the book. If you found this video helpful, it would also help me and help others see this content if you were to like the video or subscribe to the video. Comment on the video. Let me know what stood out to you about this presentation of sociometry. Let me know if you have any questions about sociometry. Let me know if there's other videos that I haven't made yet that would be really helpful for you that you'd like to see in the future. I'm really interested in hearing from you and hearing about how this content lands on you, how it's useful for you, or how it challenges you, how it fits with ways that you understand other theories, other ways of working. I'm really interested in connecting. So thanks again for watching this video, and check out some of the other videos on our channel here.